Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. And as we know, American foreign policy is heating up, especially in Syria right now. Earlier today, we released a video about my personal thoughts about the collusion that is happening between social media, mainstream media, and the government, pretty much squashing the voices of dissent and escalating tensions very gravely with American foreign policy. And now I wanted to do a more in-depth video with Partisan Girl. She is definitely an expert on the ground, has her sources, knows a lot about Syria and everything that's happening there, and has information that, of course, you won't get on the mainstream media. And what I wanted to talk to you about, Partisan Girl, is all the events that are ramping up right now in Syria with, of course, just moments ago, the United States military saying that they're preparing and having all options on the table for Syria. And just literally moments ago, the United States saying that Assad had approved gas attacks in Idlib, which of course is setting the stage for a major military conflict right now. As we know, there was Russian military drills, American military drills, all inside and outside of Syria. InfoWars is reporting that, quote, Trump kept his promise to attack Syria if Assad invaded Idlib. And as we know, just moments ago, there was an airstrike, which the Russian defense minister is saying was a white phosphorus bombing of the Deir Zor province inside of Syria right now. And Partisan Girl, what are you hearing from your sources? What is happening right now with all these allegations, all this news out there?
Well, I read the report about the white phosphorus attack on Deir Zor, but I don't have any on-the-ground information about that. I can't really confirm it or provide any new information that isn't in the media, because at the moment it's very early in Syria. It's something like 5 a.m., so I can't really contact anyone right now. But it wouldn't be the first time that the U.S. used white phosphorus in Syria. They used it on Raqqa. And what we know about Deir Zor is that the Syrian military actually liberated the province from ISIS. In fact, this is a town that is west of the Euphrates, and everything east of the Euphrates is currently under U.S. occupation. And the U.S. has bombed near that area, especially Al-Qaim border point. They have bombed Syrian soldiers in that area. In fact, they once bombed Syrian soldiers in that area whilst they were fighting ISIS in 2016. So it wouldn't be the first time. And, in the past, they also haven't necessarily admitted that any of this has happened. Sometimes they do admit it, sometimes they don't. So if you're waiting for an admission from the U.S. that this has happened, you might not be getting one. But at the moment, that's all the information I have about that. I will update you if I get any more.
Well, there's, of course, a lot of information coming late to the game. I mean, Israel just a couple days ago admitted that they bombed Syria 200 times over the past 2 years. And right now, it really does seem like there's a big escalation happening. There's a lot of false media reports. There's always different side of the story. But what do you see happening now, and how do you see it unfolding?
Well, it's interesting because Israel bombed Al-Qaeda 0 times. They bombed ISIS 0 times. And in fact, they were helping Al-Qaeda and ISIS on the Syrian border, in the demilitarized zone, which is the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights, which is Syrian land. We all know that Israel has been supporting the terrorists in Syria since day one. And of course, this whole war, it was written down in the 1980s by Oded Yunon in the Yunon Plan, the Israeli intelligence guy that wrote this document that says this is how we're going to destroy all our neighbors and make sure that nobody can threaten our ethnocentric theocratic Jewish state. So it's basically this whole entire war in Syria is for Israel's benefit mostly. As the second part of your question, I have to ask you what that was again. I forgot.
Well, there's a lot of disinformation out there, and it wasn't also just Israel. It was Saudi Arabia, it was Turkey, it was the United States that financed and threw so much money and so much resources to the rebels, which of course ended up in radical Islamic terrorist hands to fight Bashar al-Assad. This kind of information warfare, and yeah, and we were talking about that for, since the beginning. Ever since we were looking at all the direct evidence, all the photos, all the videos, all the sources, all the investigative journalists that came out, we were talking about this, and we were deemed fake news for exposing that fact. That is clearly a fact now that a lot of people are still trying to forget. But this kind of disinformation warfare is definitely heating up inside of Syria, and especially in the digital age, as we're seeing not only a lot of prominent anti-establishment, but also a lot of prominent anti-war people having their views suppressed, other people being permanently banned. But one of the people that was recently hit is, of course, the state of Syria and all of their state-run media channels that were just shut down by YouTube, terminating their accounts, of course, showing a clear connection between the U.S. military-industrial complex and the big tech monopolies that are going to censor these voices. So if you could tell us, were you aware of some of these channels? What were these channels? What information were they providing? What do you see with this latest censorship effort that happened by Google?
Well, one of them was actually the Syrian president's YouTube channel, where he would upload his interviews. And some of the Syrian media, like state media channels, but also like private Syrian citizens, which were against Al-Qaeda, which were supportive of the army, making YouTube videos. Like Arabi Suri is one of my friends. He's been making videos since the start of the war, since 2011, and he was shut down. It's kind of very racist, in fact. They're just basically shutting down anyone who's Syrian that isn't on the pro-imperial neocon agenda. And my YouTube channel was almost shut down. I had to put all my videos on private to stop them from getting flagged and from it getting shut down. Who knows what's going to happen next? As you know, I was shut down for 6 months off Facebook, and I was referred to as a Russian bot. And they tried to shut down my Twitter account because of that. Obviously, I came out and said I wasn't a bot. So it's a very dangerous time, and I think especially it's happening now because they want to shut down any sort of voice that could possibly expose the fact that the coming false flag chemical attack is a false flag. And InfoWars was one such a voice. And of course, I heard also that one of these, was it Vox, that wanted your channel shut down as well?
Well, they definitely labeled us in supposedly YouTube extremists, so I put on all my extreme gear and just kind of went crazy on this YouTube channel in response to that. But of course, anyone who goes against the grain, anyone who's anti-establishment, of course, is a target. The military-industrial complex does have ties to big social media companies. They, of course, have been strongly connected with the mainstream media, pushing lies on the American people to get them into the war. And now, to me, this is another step that's happening. Some people are correlating it with, of course, more bigger aggressive actions by the United States, which of course they do not want questioned, and the biggest people questioning them are the people online. Now, Alex Jones is a little different. He's kind of entertaining the fact that Donald Trump may be elected if he attacks Syria, kind of being amused by that a little bit, which I don't understand, and that's a whole nother issue to get into. But most importantly, the issues that they're trying to keep away from us are basic issues of facts. You have to look at both sides of the story. You want to look at what the Syrians, the Russians, the Iranians are saying, and you want to look at what the United States, Israel, and Saudi Arabia are saying, and usually sometimes the truth is in the middle. The whole white phosphorus thing is still unsubstantiated. We still have to wait for pictures and videos and actual evidence to come into and be as clear as we can and be as good as we can to make sure that we don't provide a disservice. But this is turning to a whole new level of disinformation, especially if you look at what Donald Trump tweeted a couple days ago, saying that President Bashar al-Assad of Syria must not be reckless, must not recklessly attack Idlib province. The Russians and Iranians would be making a grave humanitarian mistake. We're also seeing Nikki Haley talking about if there is a chemical weapons attack, it's definitely going to be by Assad. Meanwhile, the important facts of how there's Al-Qaeda inside Idlib, how they control the majority of that province, most of Americans are not privy to. Most of Americans are not getting that information or even seeing how the rebel groups inside Idlib are carrying terrorist attacks, mainly against also Christians, Syrian Christians, and other towns who don't go along with their religious doctrine and their radical Islamic oppressive views. So what I wanted to ask you specifically is, there's a lot of disinformation right now. What do you make of Trump standing behind Idlib with Nikki Haley, trying to make this out like it's a humanitarian crisis?
I will get to that, but I just wanted to quickly go back to the censorship point just a little bit again. You know, as a matter of fact, even years ago, especially at the start of the Syrian war, many Syrian channels were getting censored off YouTube. Channels that specifically highlighted the fact that the US was working with Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Channels like Zen. You know, we're talking about years of historical evidence just being wiped off the internet, kind of memory hold. And smaller channels, South Front, Russian channels, they were getting shut down, but it wasn't getting as much media because these are smaller channels. So the censorship is just increasing, and any one of us could be next and we could go and there would be no recourse. But yes, it's all part of this disinformation. It's all part of this war drive. And Trump, you know, it's interesting to see previous, the Trump that was elected versus now. If you read all his previous tweets about how the rebels are Al-Qaeda, Clinton is working with Al-Qaeda, we don't want to go to war to help the rebels win, etc., etc. Now he's gone and turned a completely turncoat. And is it perhaps because of all the pressure he's receiving in the media? Is it perhaps because he knows that if he doesn't do what the deep state want him to do, then he's basically gone? Even if that were, or maybe he was fooling us all along. You know, I always put a possibility that he was going to turncoat. In fact, I said, at least with Trump, there's a chance that things will get better, but that was always in my mind a small chance. I guess it doesn't really matter, because even if he, you know, deep down wanted to do the right thing, he's obviously putting himself first and being a coward. So I don't think that the Trump we have now is in any way, shape, or form the Trump that people wanted him to be. So why support him? Basically, Nikki Haley and Trump are backing Al-Qaeda. If you watched my recent video on my YouTube channel, I show you the State Department saying that Idlib province is the biggest Al-Qaeda stronghold since 9/11, and Nikki Haley at the same time saying don't attack, Idlib. So okay, there are civilians there being trapped by Al-Qaeda, but are we going to just leave it like that? Al-Qaeda are cutting people's heads off in the street. They're cutting men's arms off for stealing or smoking. They're shooting women in the street for adultery. You know, they're completely insane. They're stealing from people. They're massacring Shiite towns. Shiites are like a sect of Islam that they don't like. They killed like 200 people, including children, in the town of Hua and Karfia because they bombed them while they were trying to evacuate in buses. That was called a blitz by CNN. You know, that's how callous they are. 200 people. We have video of those people being bombed by them. So these Al-Qaeda types, they will not hesitate to gas Syrian civilians to try to get the US to intervene. And even if they themselves don't do it, I'm sure that the Mossad or the CIA would do it for them, just so that they can attack Syrian military targets or infrastructure. But because that's what it's all about, really. It's about trying to intimidate Syria, trying to keep Syria divided and sliced up into Al-Qaeda regions and Kurdish regions, and for the US to have any way it can to just get that little bit more out of this war in terms of destroying Syrian infrastructure or missile technology that could possibly use to defend itself.
Yeah, it's definitely mind-boggling seeing Donald Trump saying, don't attack Idlib. At the same time, just, when he was campaigning, he was on the national stage pretty much saying Obama and Hillary Clinton created ISIS because of their foreign policy. And he was right about that. But again, as soon as he gets into office, as soon as I seen him hanging out with Henry Kissinger, I was like, oh man, this is bad news. This is not going to turn out good for a lot of people. And I was warning people even before he sat in the Oval Office, being like, watch out for this one, because there's going to be a lot of things to worry about. And he has been more aggressive than Barack Obama, directly attacking the Syrian military twice. We're just getting details of the third attack that happened, allegedly, according to Russians, white fosters. But again, we'll find out the truth about that as the events keep coming. But again, you've been talking about this. I've been talking about this for a very long time. We've been called conspiracy theorists. We've been attacked by the media. We've been called fake news, even though everything we've been saying has been coming true. You've been making many predictions that have come true. And it definitely looks like they're just trying to postpone this conflict as long as possible. And we're not just making this stuff up. It's not just us saying this. It's also U.S. representatives like U.S. Senator Richard Black, who's coming out and saying that the United States, and especially British MI6, is planning a fake chemical weapons attack on Syria. Tulsi Gabbard released a statement saying, please make sure we can evacuate the civilians so that the Al-Qaeda controlled city of Idlib does not get affected by the big bombing campaigns and by the big attacks, and admitting that this is an Al-Qaeda area, which of course Nikki Haley and Donald Trump have somehow conveniently forgot, even though this was one of the major rallying calls behind him becoming president and why people supported him. And that's why I think it's important to be critical. It's important not to just bring people up and to worship them, but to hold their feet to the fire and be and have them be accountable. Syrian Girl, Partisan Girl, you're awesome. Anything else you want to say on this very specific issue, and where can people find you?
Yes, I do. I want to say that the Idlib offensive is going to go ahead. The Syrian military is going to defeat Al-Qaeda. There might be a chemical weapons attack. I think there probably will be a false flag chemical attack, and the U.S. may bomb. But it's not going to stop the Syrian military from going forward. The thing that's going to be more of a struggle, and thing that I'm going to definitely need your help with, is that the next part of the battle is going to be the northeast. It's going to be the Kurdish-held areas and the U.S. occupation there. The Kurdish areas, just yesterday, they killed like 17 Syrian soldiers. They are not to be trusted. They have been ethnically cleansing Christian towns, forcing people to basically obey them, be conscripted by them, or learn Kurdish when they're not Kurdish, they're Syrian. Kurds at the moment are about 6% of the Syrian population, but the Kurdish militias that the U.S. support control 30% of Syrian land and most of the oil, 80% of the oil and a lot of the water. And basically, this next stage is going to be very difficult because the media have made sure to make people believe that, Kurds have a right to Syrian land, where Syrian land belongs to all Syrians, not just a specific group. You wouldn't want the United States cut up on race. Everybody should be able to share the resources equally. And that's going to be the next stage. And it's going to be probably harder than Idlib, because everybody knows by now that Idlib is run by Al-Qaeda. Even the State Department, Brett McCurk, said that. So if you want to follow me, my Twitter is Partisan Girl, my YouTube is Syrian Girl Partisan, and my Facebook is Partisan Girl. So thank you very much for having me on.
Partisan Girl, thank you so much. Your links, of course, will be in the description of this video. And, of course, this conflict is not going away anytime soon, and it will only escalate from here, especially in the northeast region that you just mentioned, especially with all the U.S. military personnel there, especially with the Kurds, especially with the complicated geopolitical situation that is only becoming more complicated as there are lesser voices of reason. We're still here. So I hope you guys appreciate that. And as we're still here, make sure you support us with your likes, with your clicks, with your eyes and ears. You guys are more important than ever. Thank you again so much for watching. Stay tuned for a lot more.